My teacher. Teachers play a big role in our lives. They help us learn and grow. I want to talk about my favorite teacher. Her name is Mrs. Johnson. She teaches English at my school. She is a kind and caring person. Mrs. Johnson makes learning fun. From the first day in her class, I liked her. She greeted every student with a smile. She made us feel welcome. Her classroom is bright and colorful. There are posters of famous authors on the walls. There is also a big bookshelf filled with books. I love to spend time in her classroom. Mrs. Johnson loves to read. She often shares stories with us. She reads stories out loud with great enthusiasm. Her voice brings the characters to life. We all listen carefully. After reading, we discuss the story. She asks us questions to make us think. This helps us understand the story better. I have learned so much from her. One of the best things about Mrs. Johnson is her teaching style. She uses different methods to help us learn. Sometimes she uses videos to explain lessons. Other times she lets us work in groups. Group work helps us learn from each other. We can share ideas and thoughts. It makes learning more enjoyable. Mrs. Johnson also encourages us to be creative. She often assigns fun projects. For example, we once created our own storybooks. I wrote a story about a brave knight. I illustrated it with my drawings. Mrs. Johnson loved my book. She praised my creativity. This made me feel proud. It inspired me to write more. Another reason I like Mrs. Johnson is her patience. Sometimes I struggle with my writing. I find it hard to express my thoughts. But Mrs. Johnson never gets frustrated. She takes the time to help me. She gives me tips and advice. She reads my work and gives feedback. Her support helps me improve. I appreciate her understanding nature. Mrs. Johnson cares about her students. She always asks how we are doing. If someone is sad, she notices. She takes time to talk to that student. She offers help and encouragement. Last year, I was nervous about a presentation. I told her how I felt. She gave me advice on how to prepare. On the day of the presentation, she cheered me on. Her support made a big difference. Mrs. Johnson also makes learning relevant. She connects lessons to our lives. When we learn about grammar, she uses examples from songs. This helps us remember the rules. She makes lessons interesting and engaging. I look forward to her classes every day. In addition to being a great teacher, Mrs. Johnson is a wonderful person. She shares stories about her life. She tells us about her travels and adventures. It shows us that learning is a lifelong journey. She inspires us to explore the world around us. Outside of the classroom, Mrs. Johnson organizes fun activities. She plans field trips to museums and theaters. These trips help us see what we learn in action. I remember our trip to the art museum. We saw many beautiful paintings. Mrs. Johnson explained the history behind them. It was an exciting experience. Mrs. Johnson also encourages us to participate in school events. She supports our sports teams and clubs. She attends our games and performances. Her presence makes us feel special. We know she cares about us beyond the classroom. I have learned many valuable lessons from Mrs. Johnson. She teaches us not just about English, but about life. She emphasizes the importance of kindness and respect. She encourages us to be good citizens. Mrs. Johnson reminds us to always try our best. She believes in our potential, even when we doubt ourselves. I feel grateful to have Mrs. Johnson as my teacher. She has made a significant impact on my life. She has helped me grow as a student and as a person. I have become more confident in my abilities. I love reading and writing because of her. In conclusion, Mrs. Johnson is an amazing teacher. She inspires us every day. Her kindness, patience, and creativity make her special. I will always remember her lessons and support. Teachers like Mrs. Johnson make a difference in our lives. I hope to make her proud as I continue my education.